So I just got back from rent court. Yeah, we'll leave the sunglasses on. So I just got back from rent court, and I figured it would make a good video for those of you who either haven't been there yet. Well, you either haven't been there and you own a rental property and you've been lucky enough to not have to go to rent court, or you're thinking about getting into rental properties and just wonder what rent court might be like or what it's about. So this is the first time I've had to go in about 2 years. Luckily, it's only the third time total in about 10 years of having rental properties. And part of that is because I try to maintain good relationships with my tenants, and most of my tenants, maybe I've just been lucky, but they've either left or on their own, or I just haven't had to go to court usually. And even in this case, she won't be leaving. I won't be evicting her. I just did it so she'd have something to take to social services. So, and so she knows I'm serious. If you're weak about it and you just give them a month free or something like that, they'll just take advantage of you down the road. So, anyway, so rent court itself. Here's how it works, okay? Because it's important. You'll waste half a day going down and not have all the pieces of the puzzle that you need. And I'm in Baltimore, and this is for Baltimore City. Baltimore County is about the same because it's all District Court of Maryland, so it's very similar. Sometimes the fees are a little different, but in Baltimore City is what I just did today. So while it's fresh in my mind, I wanted to share it with you. You go down there, and you're going to need several things. This is just a file, okay, just to get the court date. You wait in line when you get there to get if you don't already have one, and there are multiple like carbon forms, so you have to get one from down there. Unless you pick one up somewhere, I don't know, unless you had some from a prior visit or something, and they change them every few years. So it's best to just get one when you go down there. You get a failure to pay rent form, and what you're going to do is you take the form. You need 2 checks with you or 2 money orders, because you're going to have to pay one to the District Court of Maryland, and you're going to have to pay one to the it's to the state, I guess, itself, or it may be to the city in this case. I'm not sure, but it's Director of Finance is, I think, $5. And then I'm going to actually show the form on the screen here so you can see the example form that'll also have the amounts on it. But you need one, I think it's about $25 or it used to be $22. I think it's $25 this last time to the district court, and then $5 to the city or state. You need 2 checks to do that with, or 2 money orders. That's all they take. And you need all the tenants' names. You might as well take a copy of the lease with you. You need the tenants' names, the property address. If you're using an LLC, you need that name, obviously. You don't need the tax ID for the company, but you do need the address of the company, your name and address if you're an agent for someone or an agent for your LLC. And then you also need, these are 2 critical ones that are easy to forget. One is the 2 checks. If you don't have a checkbook with you, you can't pay, right? Like, it's that or a money order. And if you don't have 2 checks, if you thought it was 1 check, you're screwed. You're going to have to go back and come down in the city again, right? The other 2 things that are easy to forget, besides the tenant names, if you don't have the lease with you, and like the place I was just down there for has 5 tenants, so. And they only give you space for 4 names, so it can be a pain. The 2 things that are so easy to forget, one is if it's a prior to 1978 property and you have a lead inspection certificate, you have to have that lead inspection certificate number. The other thing that's very easy to forget, go down there and you're screwed. You got to go back home and come back down later that day or another day, and you just wasted parking and whatever amount of time it took you to get down there and park and walk in and find out you didn't have everything you needed. And sometimes you can wait 5 or 10 minutes just to get a failure to pay rent form, just to find out that you don't have all the information you need. Because that's what happened to me the first time I went down there. Not this time, but the very first time a couple of years ago. So you've got to have the lead inspection certificate number if there is one, and you've got to have the property registration number. Baltimore City has property registration. Baltimore County has property licenses. which is the same as a registration. Each county is different that way, but if you do not have one of those two with you, they will actually let you file it, but you'll get thrown out when you get into court. I believe if the judge like today's judge was very friendly, and she was willing to accept people giving her the number at that time in court, but that surprised me. I was amazed that it even got to court without those numbers on there. So make sure you have those numbers, make sure you have the 2 checks, make sure you have the tenants' names and all the address information and stuff for you and your company if you have one. And then you pay, okay? You go into the cashier office once you fill everything out, and they have example forms. That's what I'm going to show you here, or I've already shown you in this video. When you pay, okay, and I didn't realize that this time. I was waiting for a letter in the mail, but when you pay, the tenant gets a letter in the mail, but you actually get a printout right there on your form, your copy, of the court date and time. They put it right there on the form the minute you pay. So you're scheduled immediately, and when I say immediately, you have the date, but it's usually about a week later, maybe a week and a half, something like that. It depends on how busy they are, what time of year it is, all that kind of stuff. But this one was about a week and a half after I filed. So may have even been 2 weeks, but I think it was about a week and a half. I'll have to go look again. But so then you show up for your court date. Now, there's a few things to know, at least in Baltimore City. They do not let food and drink in the building, so you don't take a bottle of water, you're gonna have to throw it away. I thought they didn't allow cell phones. Keep in mind there's a metal detector, okay? So don't have like a pocket knife or something like that. They're gonna give you trouble about it. But you can take your cell phone into the building and into the courtroom, but they want it off in the courtroom. Now, I just left it in my pocket on vibrate, and that's fine. They're not that strict. But if you pull that thing out during court, there's a chance they will either take it from you or kick you out of the courtroom. They may give you a warning, but you don't want to be playing with your phone once court's in session. That's the big thing. And then they won't let you take drinks or food in there at all in the whole building. So let's see. So we got there. Our court time, right, is 8:15, but really all they're telling us is that it's the morning session. What time they're going to call you is you don't know. You just know it's probably before noon, or almost definitely before noon. In fact, it's usually within the first couple hours. So we got there, meaning because I ran into the tenant too. I was actually there about 7:45 thinking I could at least get into the building, and they don't even let you in the building until 8:15 in the city. So I went back to my car, got my phone, came back out, sat with the tenant. Luckily it's a nice day like you can see today. And I'm friendly with the tenant, so we just sat there and talked for a half hour. Well, actually I sat in my car for 15 minutes, then we talked for 5 minutes, right? Then we went in. They put you through the metal detector, and we're looking for our docket up on the screen, and then we realized there's no rent court dockets aren't up on the screen. So all you do is you just go into the room. This was courtroom 2, which is what they usually use in the city, and so they make you line up to check in, okay? Which they tell you when you walk in the door, so they just want to see if you're there or not, because a lot of people file and then don't show up. There was a chance I wasn't going to show up, but the tenant hasn't paid yet and still needs the full eviction notice to try to get help with social services, so I showed up. Plus she was going to show up, so I knew I had to show up. If you don't show up as the landlord, the case gets thrown out and you got to start over again if you want to refile. Now if the tenant paid, who cares? You don't have to show up. They just kill the case and it's no big deal. You spent your money, but there's no penalty for not going to court for you, except that the case gets thrown out. If you show up and the tenant does not, which is the case probably 3/4 of the time, I would say, more than half the time for sure the tenant doesn't show up, probably about 3/4 of the time. The landlord gets up there and they just find in favor of the landlord. It's no penalty against the tenant. It just means the proceeding is gonna, the tenant's just not there to argue. And so as long as the paperwork's filled out properly, they take the landlord's word. Sorry, I hear someone talking in the background. they take the landlord's word that the rent is due. No one's there to argue it, right? So because some tenants will come in and argue that they've paid and they have receipts. Some tenants argue that the house is in some sort of disrepair and therefore they don't owe rent, and in that case they send your case to the escrow court, because that's a different situation if the tenant has a right to not pay because the house is in bad repair. So anyway, you sit there. The funny thing is we checked in at 8:15, but they don't start court until 9. So we didn't really need to get there till probably 8:30. Really, we could have just checked in at 8:30. I haven't been there in 2 years, so I always forget how the exact timings of things work. Plus, I worry it's going to change from year to year. So some time wasted, but at least I was there early, and I got some other stuff done on my phone, and it was fine. So anyway, you sit there. Once you check in, you sit there and you wait. And they check in other people. Sometimes, like, we had a nonprofit lawyer come in and offer help to some of the tenants that needed help. There was a guy helping Section 8 people. They're just kind of doing some due diligence paperwork stuff in the background. And then at about 9:05, the court starts. They have you stand up. You've seen court on TV. They have you stand up. You swear that you're going to tell the truth. The whole room does that at one time. And then you just wait for your case to be called. And landlords that have multiple cases will stand up there usually and deal with all the cases at once. I've never had more than one at a time. But they just call you up there, and then again, if the tenant doesn't show, they find in favor of the landlord. If the tenant does show, like today my tenant was there, but she had no argument. So she really didn't have to show up. She just said, yeah, I owe the rent, and she told me she was going to try to get an extension on the date, but I think she realized from me talking to her that if she just pays first week of the next month anyway, which is next week or week after next, I said, look, if you just give me the next month, first week of July, this is June 22nd. I said, if you get me rent first week of July, this is all going to cancel out anyway, because the eviction, that's the other thing I'll include, I almost forgot, is it takes several days once they do find in favor of the landlord. It takes, I think, about 4 or 5 days from what they said today and what I remember. I haven't received it yet this time around, but it takes 4 or 5 days to actually get the judgment, like, in the mail. They basically send you the judgment, and then you then call and schedule with the sheriff, which takes a couple of weeks basically, because the sheriff's just busy as much as anything. And I don't know if he wasn't busy, if they'd still give 2 or 3 weeks, but either way, if you file right away, that's going to only give the tenant, I don't know, it's only 6 weeks from the date the rent was due to begin with. So it's pretty quick, actually. People complain about trying to get tenants out, but you can have them out pretty quick if you file right away. Usually the problem is they drag you on, you don't file, right? I've had people that, I didn't file till 6 weeks after the rent was due, and then it took another 6 weeks to get them out, and I lost 3 months worth of rent. I want to wrap this up. We're coming up on 14 minutes, and I don't like doing long videos because I don't want to bore anyone or talk too much. The only other thing is that when you file, if you haven't done it before, you have to make sure the rent is actually due. It's not actually due on the 1st. There's usually, and it depends on your lease and it depends on your local laws, but there's usually a grace period, right? When the late fee kicks in, like on the 5th, that's when it's late. It's not late until it actually hits the end of that grace period, which is usually like the 5th of the month. So keep that in mind. You got to wait until that grace period is up before you file. And then the only other thing I wanted to tell you, late fees. Just keep in mind, if you're a landlord, you know this. If not, you may need to look into it. But late fees are limited. Here they're limited to 5%. I don't know if that's nationwide or not, but 5% of the rent each month can be a late fee. That's it. And that's it. And I will get this out to you guys. Thanks for watching.